Hello everyone. This may or may not become a series of free solve critiques, but for now at least I am offering a free Ao5 critique. If you want more information you can DM me on Discord for that. But if you do want in-depth critiques or cube coaching, more information on that will be on screen and in the description, or you can just send me a DM and we can figure it out from there. Anyway, in this video we'll be critiquing Dylan Himmelfarb's 8.81 3x3 average of 5. So your cross pieces were in pretty good positions. You just inserted this piece like that, D prime, and then you did R prime F, R2 to insert the other two. I don't think there was anything wrong with that cross solution, but I think what you should have been doing, especially averaging around 8 seconds, is you should have been looking ahead to any other pair. And I say this because what you did next was kind of concerning. You did U prime, and I thought you would have gone straight into doing this pair, but instead you did a U with 2 rotations. I think what you were trying to do was getting this pair into the front slot, but you can definitely do this from the back as well. And I definitely don't recommend doing 2 rotations for one F2L pair. After doing those 2 rotations, you solve this as normal, but when you inserted it, that was a 3rd rotation. So you had 3 rotations just for that one pair. At your level, that definitely should not be happening, and I would say that you should have a maximum of 4 rotations for every single solve. And also while you were inserting this pair, you did a U, and then you did a U rotation. For stuff like this F2L pair, you should definitely know from this point that you're gonna have to do a U2, so you should be prepared to do a U2 flick instead of doing a U and then a U again. Maybe you were trying to do that for it to flow with the rotation, but it's still a lot more efficient to be doing the U2 flicks. After that you did another max park U2, so you did U prime again, and then you just inserted it really fast just like normal. And at this point I see it's definitely a habit to be rotating and doing U moves, because what you did here was you did a U, you rotated, and then you rotated again just to do this pair. At this stage, you should already be able to tell that this piece pairs up with this piece. And you can tell by the blue stickers that once you do a U, you can just insert it into the front like that, instead of what you did by putting the pair in the front through a rotation and then inserting it into the back. But that pair could have also easily been done from the back. For instance, you could have gone like this and then solved this from the back. But anyway, what you did was you rotate again, which again you shouldn't be doing 2 rotations just to get yourself set up to do an F2L pair. But you inserted it, and then you just had this final pair, which you did just like the standard way. And then in OLL you hesitated again. You did U prime, U prime. And the only explanation I really have for this is that you were trying to recognize OLL. But when you're sub 10, you should be able to recognize OLL from any angle. So either you were trying to recognize, or you just have a bad habit of doing lots of U's and U primes. So then you did the OLL, and then for PLL, you did something really weird again. So you did U prime, and I thought you were going to go into the A perm just from here, but you did a U prime again. So you could have just done a double flick there, but you did U prime. I think once was to recognize. And then you rotated, and then did the PLL from there. I have 2 tips for PLL here. Number 1, you should learn what's called 2-phase PLL recognition. My second tip for you is to not rotate in last layer unless it's part of your algorithm, such as a bad V-perm. And I see why you tried to align the block, and it was so that you wouldn't have to do AUFs. But when you do A-perms, your right hand ends up in a good spot to do U's or U2s anyway. So there was really no reason for you to be rotating just to do PLL. Even from here, you could have just done it like this, or just regripped here. So from this one solve alone, I can tell you a lot. Your transition phases aren't that good. And by transition phases, I mean when you go from cross to F2L to F2L to F2L to F2L to OLL to PLL, you always have a lot of pauses to recognize, and you also use a lot of unnecessary U moves. So I'd recommend that you work on your look ahead and also planning ahead. My second tip is to work on not exactly your efficiency, but just making sure that you don't do that many rotations in F2L. So learning how to recognize and decipher where pieces are just from looking like this instead of having to rotate a lot. Going back to your solve, this is how I would execute exactly what your solution was. So the cross, And then this pair I would have done from the front. And then inserted it into the back so that I have these two front slots open. And then I would have been in position to do this pair. And then we already know that these two slots are solved, which means that there's only the top and the left side left for all the rest of the pieces to be. And just by process of elimination, we would know that this pair matches up. And then you could have just solved this pair from the back. Holo, and then Pilo, just like that. So for your second solve, you did white cross again. Now your cross solution wasn't inherently bad, but I think just because of the F moves, you could have executed it a bit differently. So what I personally would have done is I would have done it from the left, just like that. And that also leaves the right pretty free so that you can look ahead on the right pretty easily. But that's just my recommendation because I feel like F moves are a bit hard to execute. But from here, again, for some reason you rotated and rotated again. But while you were rotating, you also did a U prime. And I feel like that was because a lot of your pieces for F2L are in the bottom layer. So I have two recommendations for you. Number one, just look to the back. You don't need to do a Y2 every time you're looking for something, or you could have just done wide moves to quickly look at it. Or what I would have recommended is just process of elimination again. So because there's only 4 green edges and we know that all 4 are here, and we can see that these two don't go with this corner right here, so that would mean that these two pair together. So you rotated twice, then you did a U2, and then you took this pair out, and then you rotated again to insert the pair. So again, that was 3 rotations just for your first F2L pair, and that definitely should not be happening. On the other hand, when you were still at this angle, you could have just looked at the back, taken it out, and used 1 rotation to insert it, and we would still end up in the same orientation. So then obviously you went straight into this pair, and then you hesitated for a second. You went up, and then you went back down before looking to solve this pair. And then you did your third pair like this. And for your final pair, you did it like this. And then for this Olo, you regripped. And then your PLO was fine as well. The third solve was your worst out of the 5, and it was also the only solve that you did yellow cross. So your cross pieces were here, 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 and here, and you had this block, and the edge was here. So you did this in a pretty standard way. But instead of doing a U to insert this piece like that, you did a U2, and you were about to insert it, but then you went down and you just inserted it like that. Honestly, I think you should have just committed to it, but either way you ended up making the X cross, and then you started doing this thing again where you rotate and do a U prime and then you rotate again. And what you did here was a bit interesting. I don't know if this was just a mistake or something else, but you took out the piece like that. But when you take out this piece, it doesn't pair straight away. And then you did a max park U prime, and then you rotated this way, you rotated back, and then you rotated again to make this your front slot. And this is a big issue because you rotated 4 times just to get this case. And then you just solved it like normal. So what you should have done is you should have seen that the only piece useful is this one in the top layer. So you should have looked for where that corner was, which is here, and recognized that if you rotate once, you can pair it up and just insert it. Or if you really, really wanted it in the front slot, you could have rotated the other way and then inserted it like that. But I don't recommend that because if you did do that, you would have all your front slots filled out, so then you'd have to rotate again for your next F2L pair. Or alternatively, while you were already on the side, you should have seen that this pairs up with that, not like this, but like this. So that would have still been 3 rotations, but that's less than 4. And that also leaves you with 2 front slots open. So after that, you were left with 2 front slots done and 2 back slots empty. So that meant you had to rotate, but straight away you did a U prime U, and then you saw this pair, so you rotated again, and you rotate it again. So again, that is too many rotations. And your final pair was alright, you just solved it like normal. And then for Ola, what you did was pretty inefficient. You did 3 U primes just to get into position to do your Ola. So again, I recommend learning how to recognize just from 2 sides. So you should have been able to instantly tell that this would have been a U2 into your Ola. And then again with your A primes, you did a U prime, and I thought you would have done it from here, but then you did a U2 and you rotated like this, which is a massive rotation just to get into position so that you wouldn't have to do an AUF at the end. Firstly, I think if you learned how to recognize PLL, you could have just done a U and then gone straight into it instead of doing U prime 3. But also just do it from here, like that. For your fourth solve, you had cross pieces here, 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 and here. So what you did first was you inserted red with a B prime. Then you did a U to insert the other 2 pieces. Personally, I would have done it from this angle. So put it in on the left, so that instead of having to regrip both my right and left hands, I could just regrip with only this hand. So from here you did a U prime, and then you rotated, and then you did this pair. So I think the obvious 2 things here are, number 1, plan your first pair, but also there were many ways you could have just not rotated. Like if you wanted to do this pair, you could have done it like this, or you could have done it like this, instead of having to rotate. Anyway, you rotated again and you did this pair. And then you rotated and you did something kind of weird. You did this. So that was just taking out the pair and then inserting it with a lefty hedge slammer. The recommendation for when you have a solve slot in the wrong place is just to solve that F2L pair. Like for instance, this one just needed to go in, and usually that will take out the next pair like it would have in this case. So after you did that weird thing, you just had this as your final slot. Then you did OLO, and then for PLO you did U prime, and then you kind of did this and then you looked up before doing the R prime. And then for your R prime you did something RUD, but it had a regrip at the start. And I feel like I used to use that algorithm, but I changed because of that starting regrip. And that's regripless. For your final solve, you had cross pieces here, and I think I would have done your exact same cross solution, so just insert like that, and then the final piece in like that. But what you did next was you did rotate, and then you rotated with a U, and then you saw this pair, so you rotated again just to insert it. My recommendation for you for your first F2L slot is don't just start rotating and spamming U moves. Instead, just look at what you have in front of you and try and see what you can do just from that. But my biggest recommendation is to just plan your first pair. So after you inserted this, you rotated twice again just to do this pair. I think it would have been fine just to rotate once and do it lefty. And I know that you rely a lot on your TPS, but that did not require 2 rotations to do. And also going back to this, you did triple sexy, which is fine. But in my opinion, I think pinching to do triple sexy might be a bit slower than just doing this. After that, you did U prime, U prime, U, which again, never do that. Just tilt the cube if you want to look at more pieces. So after that, you saw this pair and you inserted it using this insert. Honestly, I think that's fine, but also because you are a righty solver, I would have just rotated for the insert just so that you would have this in the front instead. But what you did was also fine, and then you just went into this. And then you had an Ola, which you did like this. And then U prime, and then U prime. So that is basically it for this 3x3 solve critique. My number 1 tip coming from this is to not rely so much on your TPS, but instead work on looking ahead and planning your first F2L pair. Additionally, stop rotating and work on your efficiency for F2L because that could definitely be improved. And as for last layer, definitely learn how to recognize every single case just from 2 sides, and do not rotate for any PLLs. I think you have a lot of potential, especially with your TPS, so if you just worked harder on looking ahead, I think you should be fine. That can be done by doing slow solves, metronome solves, and anything else like that. So anyways, that's pretty much it from me. If you want any critiques for yourself, leave a comment or DM me, or check out the poster for more options, and I'll see you guys in the next video.